Theories. Sometimes it's fun to look back on a cartoon you grew up watching and think, wait, was something else going on here? And now, thanks to the internet, almost every animated show has at least a couple theories trying to convince you it's secretly about death or mental illness or the apocalypse. And I think a lot of them are dumb. So today I've gathered 20 cartoon fan theories from every corner of the internet to decide which ones are just mildly goofy and which ones are aggressively stupid. The higher they rank, the dumber they are. So let's strap on our MatPat helmets, connect some non-existent dots, and dive into the world of stupid cartoon conspiracies. Ash is in a coma. Pokemon. This theory states that in the very first episode of Pokemon, when Ash gets absolutely mauled by a flock of sparrows, the injuries were so severe that it actually put him into a coma, and everything after that, just a dream. Some versions say it was when he got electrocuted by Pikachu, some others say he fell off his bike, some even go further and claim Ash is just a normal kid in a normal world, and every Pokemon and adventure that we see is just a coma-induced dream. Which is of course convenient because you can say this about literally any show that you watch. SpongeBob? He's in a coma. Breaking Bad? Coma. This YouTube video? Guess what, bud? You're in a coma. The main reasonings that people point to are that Ash never ages and that characters like Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny look alike. First of all, Ash doesn't age because he's a 10-year-old character marketed to other kids. You think kids are lining up to watch a 29-year-old complain about back pain while training his Pokemon? Although, Nintendo, if you are interested in that, I am available. And then Nurse Joy and Officer Jenny is just a running gag. It's not only funny, but it saves time and money for the people making the show. At the end of the day, this is just one of the laziest fan theory tropes. Main character doesn't change, must be in a coma. It's not the dumbest theory ever, but it's just so aggressively uncreative. Gonna put this one on A tier. Mental disorders. Winnie the Pooh. One of the most popular cartoon fan theories states that all the characters in 100 Acre Woods are actually representations of different mental illnesses. According to the internet, Pooh represents eating disorders, Piglet has anxiety, Tigger has ADHD, Rabbit has OCD, and Eeyore of course has depression. And then some versions of the theory even go further and suggest that Christopher Robin himself is schizophrenic, which would kind of just undo the rest of these since they'd be hallucinations. So that's fun. Now, I don't think this is the dumbest theory ever. It's at least trying to analyze something. But here's my main issue with it. The original Winnie the Pooh stories were written in the 1920s, and the more modern clinical understandings of like ADHD and OCD just weren't as common knowledge back then. So this feels less like intentional symbolism and more just the internet trying to put more depth on these characters than there really is. Pooh likes honey. Piglet gets worried a lot. Eeyore is sad. These aren't diagnoses, these are just character variety. You can do this with pretty much any group of characters if you really squint hard enough. You know, the Ninja Turtles represent the stages of grief now. Mikey is bargaining. At some point, it stops being actual insight into the characters and more just projecting things that aren't there onto them. It's not like offensively bad, but it's definitely overreaching when it really doesn't have to be. Let's say B tier. Donkey was a human. Shrek. Alright, I'd never heard this theory before, but it might have persuaded me. In the Shrek series, the world is just full of fairy tale creatures. You've got ogres, princesses, talking wolves, gingerbread men come to life, and then there's just Donkey.
It's just a donkey.
Yeah, he's a talking donkey, but not from any specific works of literature. Or is that what they want you to think? Because you know who is in these movies? Pinocchio. And if you remember the absolute unhinged fever dream that is Pinocchio, there's a big part in the story where they travel to Pleasure Island, a place where all the little boys get turned into donkeys. And sure, there are some other talking animals in the Shrek cinematic universe, or the SCU, and there's even an offhand comment about him being traded for magical beans. But you know what? I don't care. This theory isn't trying to make it secretly about death or trauma or anything like that. It's just a fun way to connect two fairy tales together. It adds some flavor to it without the whole thing being like grim, dark, and edgy. And honestly, I like it. I think this is canon for me now. So I'm going to put this one at the bottom. D tier. Bandit and Chili are criminals. Bluey. With Bluey being one of the biggest shows in the past decade, it was only a matter of time before the internet tried to make it secretly dark. This theory claims Bluey's parents, Bandit and Chili Healer, are running an underground artifact smuggling operation. Bandit is an archaeologist, Chili works at an airport. They have a really nice house. Case closed, I guess. The idea is that Bandit discovers the rare artifacts through his work, and Chili uses her airport connections to sneak him through, which is a wild leap considering most of the show is based on the kids just pretending to be like grannies and stuff. Even if you ignore the fact that most of the show is these parents trying to teach the kids how to be good people, or dogs. There are entire episodes about budgeting and understanding the value of money. If they're secretly crime lords, are they really going to care that much about $5? Also, we don't know how actually successful Bandit is in his field of work. He's got a home office that he's always working in where he's typing away. He could be writing books or working on a thesis or something. Archaeology is not exactly minimum wage, and maybe they bought this house when it was a good time for the market. There are just so many normal explanations for this that jumping straight to international smuggling ring just feels like the internet being kind of bored. That said, I would love it if the show maybe did like an episode where they pretended to be smugglers, as sort of like a wink. It's not the worst theory. It's not the best. I'm going to go with a B tier. The Flintstones takes place after the Jetsons. This theory mostly comes from the crossover special, The Jetsons Meet the Flintstones, where Elroy decides to build a time machine to send the family into the future, but they accidentally get sent to the past. Here's where the internet steps in. What if the machine actually did work? What if they did go to the future, just not the shiny sky city that they were expecting? What if this is a post-apocalyptic future where society had to rebuild? One where modern technologies are gone but little cultural remnants remain? Stone-powered versions of old appliances? Pop culture references lingering like radiation? Yeah, no, probably not. There's one little problem here. It's been officially stated numerous times that the Flintstones takes place around 10,000 BC, and then you get the fact that neither it nor the Jetsons ever hinted at like a global apocalypse or even a war of any kind. This theory pretty much just makes like a Mad Max style backstory to old shows that just had a fun crossover. To make this theory work, you have to assume that the apocalypse happened, no one ever talks about it, and it somehow brought back the dinosaurs. It's not the worst theory out there, there's at least a little connective tissue behind it, but it's wildly overcomplicated for what was just a fun crossover of two classic shows. Gonna put this one on A tier. Dr. Facilier is a lost boy, The Princess and the Frog. This one I really want to like, but it just requires too much mental gymnastics. The theory says Dr. Facilier, the villain from Princess and the Frog, is actually one of Peter Pan's lost boys, who escaped Neverland and grew up. The main piece of evidence? His shadow. Peter Pan has his mischievous little shadow, and Dr. Facilier has a shadow that moves on its own and does spooky stuff. And that's basically it. If that's where we're putting the bar, then Bear from Bear in the Big Blue House might also be a lost boy. There's no Easter eggs really connecting the two movies, no shared characters, no timeline hints, or even subtle nods that these worlds would overlap. Just shadows. You really have to force this to try to make a connection here. I respect the creativity, I appreciate the effort, but this is less hidden lore and more connect the dots, but the dots are on opposite ends of the world and I cannot find my crayon. Not offensively dumb, just doesn't really work. Let's put this on C tier. Rubble Replacement, Paw Patrol. At least this isn't every puppy is dead. Just one puppy, and we don't even know that puppy. The theory here is that when Rubble ended up joining the team, he actually took the spot of a member that's no longer there. And we actually get quite a bit of evidence to back this one up. In the season 1 episode that shows Rubble join the crew, when he first arrives, there's already a badge on the screen with his yellow logo. The equipment that he gets all seems used and worn down, as well as being too big for him. I usually think most of the theories about these kid shows are blown way out of proportion. But, the evidence is kind of stacking up here, guys. So what happened to the original number 6? Did he have a falling out with the crew? Did they get hurt and sidelined, or worse? Did he contract rabies and Ryder had to, old yeller him? As much as I want to hate this one, it's not that bad and kind of makes sense. I do think it's still a bit dark, a bit stupid, but not that stupid. So until we get the edgy R-rated reboot in 10 years, we're going to put this one on C tier. Tarzan and Frozen. Whenever a massive movie drops, it feels like the internet automatically tries to duct tape it to another franchise. Case in point, Frozen and Tarzan. In Frozen, Anna and Elsa's parents are lost at sea. Their ship goes down, no bodies recovered. So naturally the theory became, what if they didn't die? What if they washed ashore in Africa, had a baby boy, and that boy grew up to be Tarzan? On paper, it sounds like it could work. Parents lost at sea? Check. Shipwreck survival story? Check. Dad has a mustache? Check. And that's kind of where all the evidence ends. The parents look vaguely similar if you really squint at them. The timelines are wishy-washy. The geography is thrown out the window, but people ran with it. And to be fair, one of the co-directors of Frozen even came out and said that he liked the theory, before later clarifying that it definitely wasn't canon. And then to top it all off, Frozen 2 comes out and pretty much completely obliterates this theory, showing Anna and Elsa's parents' shipwreck nowhere near Africa. So this one just really doesn't add up. I will say it's not malicious. It's not edgy just to be edgy. It's just Disney fans trying to build a shared universe here, which Disney sort of already does themselves. I mean, honestly, Frozen already connects to Tangled, so it just sort of made sense. Until it didn't. Not the dumbest theory, but definitely pretty shaky. We're gonna go with B tier. Freddie Benson is Barry B. Benson's son. Yeah, you heard me correctly. This theory claims that the Nickelodeon sitcom iCarly and the DreamWorks cinematic masterpiece B-Movie take place in the same universe. And not only that, Freddie Benson is the biological son of Barry B. Benson himself. What? Apparently, this all started from a Twitter thread, and the evidence, which is a word I'm using very lightly here, is that we never see Freddie's dad, they share the same last name, and Freddie apparently looks like a bee. And that's it. Oh, and it claims that Freddie's mom is so overprotective because she accidentally squished Barry at some point. So now we've added bee homicide to iCarly lore. Bee-aside. Sure, the actor that played Freddie has come out and said that he thinks this theory is true, but pretty sure he was making a joke, because let's be real, Freddie's dad is mentioned in the show. However, there are zero references to interspecies romance. And not once do we see a 6-foot-tall bee pay child support. To make this theory work, you have to work harder than any pollinator out there. It requires cross-species reproduction, a shared CGI live-action universe, a mother who accidentally commits bee slaughter and gets away with it, and then a son who technically should have the powers of a bee. This isn't just dumb, it is chaotic, unhinged, beautiful madness. Do I love it? Yes. Is it the dumbest thing I've ever heard? Maybe. This is going to the top of the list. S tier. The Roadrunner owns Acme. Looney Tunes. Across every version of Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner shenanigans, there's two things that are almost always true. The Roadrunner's gonna get away, the Acme product is gonna explode. So this theory asks, what if that's not incompetence? What if that's just business, baby? Wile E. is dumping his entire life savings into Acme gadgets that are specifically designed to fail. Rockets, traps, spring-loaded boxing gloves, all guaranteed to basically self-destruct. Who profits from him buying all these gadgets? Acme. Who profits from them never working? The Roadrunner. But here's where this one gets kind of interesting. In the 1995 Sega Genesis game Desert Demolition, it's revealed that Roadrunner actually becomes the president of Acme. Yeah, it's a video game, so it's probably not canon, but we don't even need that. We can just toss that evidence right out, not gonna use it. Because in the cartoons themselves, eventually it's revealed that Acme is a company owned by Roadrunner subsidiaries. And that logo they use? Suspiciously familiar. At this point, it stops feeling like a coincidence and feels a little bit more like corporate fraud. Is it possible that the Roadrunner just works with Acme? Sure. But I don't think the place I work for is going to use me as their mascot. Also, wouldn't Acme be more profitable if it just made products that actually worked? I don't know. I'm not a CEO and I'm not a 7-foot-tall bird either. So what do I know? I will say though, unlike most of these theories, this one actually has in-universe breadcrumbs. It's funny, it fits the tone of the show, and it doesn't require anyone to be secretly dead. You know what? I'm convinced, so I'm going to put this one on D tier. Professor Utonium is Samurai Jack. When I was a kid, I watched quite a bit of Powerpuff Girls. What are you going to do about it? They were badasses. Then, a few years later, Samurai Jack shows up on my screen, and I'm sitting there like, why does this guy look so familiar? Well, according to this theory, it's because they're one and the same. The theory is, after losing his wife, Jack, who doesn't age thanks to time travel nonsense, spends 300 years mastering science, changing identities, and trying to recreate what he lost. Eventually, he relocates to Townsville as Professor Utonium. He experiments with different fields, tries to create life, and then Chemical X. But here's the twist. Chemical X isn't just a random glowing ingredient. It is the essence of Aku itself. So when the professor creates the Powerpuff Girls, he accidentally reintroduces his power into the world. And who else gets powers from Chemical X? Mojo Jojo. So now the theory says that through a series of time loops and power escalations, Mojo eventually evolves into Aku, who then time travels, which eventually leads back to Jack. It's all one big cosmic animated loop. There's even an episode of Samurai Jack where he sees a ruined future version of Townsville, which fans tend to point to as evidence. Now, visually, the similarities are there. Same creator, same art style, and even the same color patterns. But the creator of both shows has straight up said that they don't share a universe. But of course, that's exactly what somebody behind a conspiracy would say. When I started working on this list, I thought this one was going to be pretty high. But honestly, it's elaborate, it's cohesive, and it does kind of connect the dots in a way that works. Is it far-fetched? Yeah. Does it require a bunch of time travel gymnastics? Absolutely. But do I love it though? Kinda. It's not a clean enough theory for me to fully accept, but I really want to. So I think I'm going to put this one on C tier. Aladdin takes place in the future. Yeah, actually, it's post-apocalyptic theory, because this apparently applies to any animated movie set in the past. So the claim here is that Aladdin isn't set in the distant past, but of course in a far future civilization that rebuilt after modern society collapsed. You know the drill. The world ended, technology was lost, humanity restarted. Sure. So what's the evidence here? First, people like to point to things like the flying carpet and talking animals, but instead of just magic, the theory argues that these are genetically modified versions of themselves. Because in a movie with a giant blue genie, a flying carpet is where we draw the line apparently. And that brings us to the real pillar of this theory, which is Genie. Specifically, the fact that Genie is constantly dropping pop culture references, like impressions of celebrities that haven't been around yet, or Disney World itself. Now, how would he know about these things if they haven't existed yet? Well, for one, he's a fucking genie. A cosmic, reality-bending, omnipotent being who probably lives outside the normal flow of time. You're telling me you can accept shape-shifting, matter creation, but pop culture references are a stretch? This theory just does what a lot of theories tend to do. It takes jokes clearly meant for the audience and treats them as hard lore. If there were any other instances here, like, ruined skyscrapers or buried ancient technology, sure, we can go there. But instead, it's just Genie did an impression. Yeah, because it was Robin Williams improvising. This one sounds smart at first. It feels like it wants to be clever, but it's just not. The second you really think about this one and accept the fact that, there's magic in this universe, everything just kind of falls apart. Not the dumbest theory ever, but it's trying way too hard to make something dark out of what is basically just jokes. So we're gonna go with B tier. Casper the Friendly Ghost is Richie Rich. Now, this theory actually predates the age of internet fandoms. It was actually first brought up on an earlier episode of The Simpsons.
I think Casper's the ghost of Richie Rich. Hey, they do look alike.
And at first glance, yeah. When you put Casper the Friendly Ghost next to Richie Rich, the resemblance is definitely there. Same round head, same face shape. So of course the theory becomes Richie Rich, lonely child billionaire, tragically dies and becomes Casper. It's dark, it's twisted, it's emotionally scarring.
Kids, could you lighten up a little?
There's just one tiny, huge problem here. They literally exist in the same universe. There is an entire run of comic books where these two are side by side going on adventures together. Simultaneously. Kind of hard to hang out with your own ghost, I'd think. So unless Richie Rich has actually discovered astral projection on top of being a child billionaire, this one really doesn't work. There's no lore that says they're the same, no timeline connections, no Easter eggs or hidden dialogue, just they sort of look similar. And that's it. This one pretty much relies on aesthetics and a joke from The Simpsons. The goddamn B-movie iCarly crossover almost works better than this. This isn't the dumbest theory on the list, but it's probably the weakest. There is just nothing here, so out of pure lack of evidence, we're gonna say A tier. Jessie belonged to Andy's mom. Toy Story. Now, yes, the full Pixar theory does exist, but I'm not getting into that with this. I just want to focus on one specific idea from Toy Story 2. What if Jessie originally belonged to Andy's mom? We know Jessie had an original owner named Emily. We see her in that emotionally devastating montage that, destroyed a generation. But here's some things we don't know. How long ago was that? The decorations in Emily's room definitely make you think late 60s, early 70s, with the clothes, the patterns, the aesthetic. And then we also only get one quick glimpse of Emily, including reddish hair. Now, Andy's mom doesn't have red hair, but hey, hair dye exists. That's not exactly airtight counter evidence, but here's where it does get kind of interesting. We never learn Andy's mom's name. Suspicious. But then there's Andy's hat. It doesn't really look like Woody's hat, it's a lot more like Jessie's, with the red brim and the white stitching. Why would Andy have this cowgirl style hat that doesn't match Woody? Unless maybe it was a hand-me-down? But then the most interesting piece of evidence, in Toy Story 2 when Andy first gets Jessie, he doesn't know who she is. So he calls her Bazooka Jane. But in Toy Story 3, he clearly knows that her name is Jessie. So who told him? Did his mom see Andy's new toy and say, oh hey, I had a toy like that named Jessie? Or did he look it up on the internet? I don't know. Let's ignore that for now. Because here's the main problem I have with this one. If Jessie was Emily's toy, and Emily is Andy's mom, why is there zero recognition between the two? You're telling me that Jessie doesn't see her old owner who she's, obsessed with and go, holy shit, it's Emily? I'm paraphrasing, of course. But there's just no dramatic reunion, no nothing. And in a series of movies that's thematically about growing up and, passing down toys, basically, that's really the biggest hole here. It's sweet, it's kind-hearted, I want this one to be true, I feel like it would add some emotional depth here. But there's just no real on-screen evidence, and the lack of emotion between the two characters just really sinks this one. So for now, I'm going with C tier. Scooby-Doo can't talk. You know that classic cartoon series with the main focus being a talking dog? Well, this theory asks, what if no? What if this dog that you see talking in every episode isn't doing this? There's some really dumb theories out there about like Shaggy hallucinating the whole thing, but I actually stumbled on a theory that I thought was just a little bit more interesting than that. But first, we have to think about Shaggy's role in Mystery Inc. Fred's the leader, Velma's smart, but what does Shaggy bring to the table? Well, actually quite a lot. He's kind of like a jack of all trades, sometimes being a master of gymnastics or a star track runner, pretty much whatever the episode needs him to be at that moment of time. And in one of these moments, he shows a real knack for ventriloquism, throwing his voice across the room. So what if he's actually putting that skill to use every episode and being the voice behind Scooby-Doo? Now, why would he do this? Maybe it's a coping mechanism, maybe he's a bit more shy than he leads on, and so he uses Scooby to voice his opinions. Or maybe he feels lonely from constantly being split off from the rest of the gang with just his dog, so he's voicing him to sort of make himself less lonely. Then we think about it, and we get the Scooby of it all. Sure, the two of these characters are usually side by side, but in the 60-year course of the show, there have been so many moments where Shaggy is not there and Scooby is still talking. I doubt the rest of the gang is just playing along, especially if Shaggy isn't around. And then there's the canonical lore that Scooby is actually descended from a race of alien beings, which is why he can talk. That's true. Look it up. Shit's wild. So while this theory isn't like dark and edgy, it also just doesn't make much sense when you really think about it. It's a bit more creative than some of the others, but it still just really doesn't work. So I'm going to go with B tier. The cul-de-sac is purgatory. Ed, and Eddy. Speaking of edgy, grimdark bullshit, everyone's dead. That's the theory. According to this one, every kid that lives on the cul-de-sac is actually deceased and in a sort of limbo stasis between worlds. And these kids aren't peacefully deceased either. No, of course not. We've got Rolf getting trampled by farm animals, Jimmy dying of a terminal illness, and then just various other random dark bullshit tragic endings. The lack of adults, proof they're all dead. The Canker Sisters? Demonic beings there to torture poor souls. Okay, that one kind of tracks. But you know what the main piece of evidence here is? Their tongues. That's right, because some of the characters have, purple or green tongues. That's proof that they're actually corpses. Is that what happens to your tongue when you die? I'm not going to Google dead guy tongue, but I'm going to assume probably not. And the actual reason is the creator of the show just thought it was funny when kids' tongues turned colors from eating candy. And all the kids are obsessed with getting candy, specifically Jawbreakers. And then the whole no adults around argument is just super weak. We don't see any adults in the Peanuts universe either. Are Charlie Brown and the gang trapped in the afterlife? Are those trombone noises actually the screams of the damned? Or maybe these shows just aren't about adults. And we do get some off-screen adults throughout the show, so are we just going to assume that there are demons, driving cars around, running businesses, pretending to be teachers? This is one of those theories that I just don't think is very clever. It's just edgy and stupid and dark bullshit. This show from your childhood actually takes place in hell is just a pretty lazy trope. I'm putting this one on A tier. Distorted reality. Courage the Cowardly Dog. What do you do when the show that you want to theorize about is already all about creepy and unsettling things going on? Time to flip the script, I guess. This theory says that in Courage the Cowardly Dog, the monsters aren't actually monsters. They're normal, everyday people in situations. And we're just seeing them through the perspective of an anxiety-ridden dog. The house in the middle of nowhere, to a dog that never leaves his property, that just might be what it feels like. Strangers knocking at the door, to us, it's just a salesperson. To Courage, it's this monstrous demon. A trip to an unfamiliar place, it could just be a trip to the vet, but to Courage, it's a demonic torture facility. Even the grotesque character designs could just be exaggerations of how a nervous animal interprets unfamiliar humans. And it also explains why Courage is constantly trying to protect Muriel. She's kind to him, she's his safety and his comfort, so when anything even remotely unfamiliar shows up, Courage's brain turns it into a supernatural threat. He's not battling literal demons, he's just fighting anxiety. Unlike most theories that try to darken a show that wasn't dark in the first place, this one actually sort of grounds this one and brings it back to reality. It doesn't add edge for the sake of it, but instead just sort of reframes it in a whole new way. It doesn't contradict anything that we're already seeing, but it does sort of enhance it. I actually really like this one, and I can't find any reasoning not to. So we're going to say D tier. Doofenshmirtz is Phineas's dad. In Phineas and Ferb, we follow a blended family that consists of 2 stepbrothers, a sister, a mom, and a dad. But Phineas's biological father is pretty much non-existent. And whenever a piece of fiction leaves a gap like that, leave it to the internet to try to make it weird. Now, to be fair, Phineas and Doof both have triangular heads with little tufts of hair. Phineas is a genius inventor, and there's even a flashback showing Linda and Doof went on a date once. But here's the issue. Doof explicitly says that he never saw Linda again after that date. And more importantly, he already has a daughter who's about the same age as Candace. And since Candace is Phineas's full sibling, for this theory to work, we have to assume that they went on a date while Doof was already married. Somehow he got both Linda and his wife pregnant at the same time, disappeared for years, and then came back and secretly had another date with Linda, where he fathered Phineas, despite the canon saying that Doof never saw her again after that. And honestly, I just don't think the Doof has it in him. So the only real connective tissue here is that they kind of have the same shaped head. You know, just because we don't see Phineas's actual dad throughout the show, doesn't mean it has to be the nearest person with a vaguely triangular head. This one just really collapses the second you take a look at it. I think this one's fairly dumb, so we're gonna go with an A tier. Krabby Patties are made of crab. SpongeBob SquarePants. Look, I get it, okay? Throughout the course of this show, one mystery that's always eluded the audience is the Krabby Patty secret formula. Now, there's plenty of theories out there about, what's in it, why it's so secretive, but the main one tends to be that it's made out of crab meat. Now, why are we automatically jumping to the conclusion that Mr. Krabs is basically committing cannibalism? Well, the theory usually likes to point out that, of course, the Krusty Krab is shaped like a lobster trap. Okay, so marketing is illegal now? I think Pizza Huts are shaped like a hat, but I'm like 98% sure I've never eaten one there. And then there's the fact that outside of Eugene and his mom, there's no other crabs around. But you know what? I've only seen Patrick and his family. I'm not assuming that they're eating and selling other starfish. And then the big piece of evidence is that there's an episode where Mr. Krabs takes a bite and says,
So that's what I taste like.
However, in the context of the episode, which I actually just covered in my banned episodes video, Mr. Krabs is going through a midlife crisis and someone says that the patty is old. So he's comparing it to himself since he himself is feeling old. There's really no solid evidence here, just more interpretations, I guess. And firstly, on appearance alone, if it was crab meat, wouldn't this be quite a lighter color? But the biggest dissuasion here is the fact that the creators of the show have actually come out and said that the Krabby Patty is 100% vegetarian. So while we still don't know what the exact secret ingredient is, we can cross off the fact that Eugene is committing crabicide. And while I don't love this theory and there's so much to disprove it, I also don't think it's the dumbest one out there, and I can see where people are coming from. So I'm probably going to put this one on B tier. The babies are in Angelica's head. Rugrats. Here we go again. This theory, for some ungodly reason, claims that Angelica is the only real child in this show. Everyone else, figments of her imagination. Just trauma-made babies. And the backstories that people add to this one, just so stupidly dark. Like Tommy dying at birth, which is why Stu's always inventing toys for a baby that he'll never have. Chucky was in a car accident with his mom, causing all of Chaz's anxiety. Phil and Lil, manifestations of Betty giving up the pregnancy because Angelica didn't know what gender the baby would be. And then it somehow gets worse. People drag All Grown Up into this, claiming that Angelica is now a drug-addled teenager hallucinating her babies as teens. Because of course she is. But here's the thing. Angelica isn't even the main character of the show. There are dozens of episodes where she barely appears, if at all. So what, we're just following imaginary babies on their imaginary adventures now? Where they interact with their parents or strangers? Nothing here makes sense. There is just zero evidence behind this one. The logic here is so full of holes that it's basically one giant crater at this point. It's trying to force this dark backstory on a show about literal babies for no reason. It's dumb, it's messy, it makes no sense when you think about it for any amount of time. It's just so completely unhinged and stupid. I cannot wrap my head around why people would take this one seriously at all. This is stupid. Going on S tier. And there you have it, 20 of the most popular cartoon fan theories and which ones I think are the dumbest. But hey, that's just a tier list. A Manham tier list. Sorry, I've been holding that in like this whole video. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with fan theories. I like them generally for the most part. I think it's a fun way to recontextualize the shows that you grew up on and sort of think about them in a whole new light. Like, I cannot tell you how many MatPat videos I've watched in my time, but as you can see, with every fun theory you have that actually makes you think critically about something, you also just kind of get a dumb one where you're like, what? So let me know in the comments which fan theory is your favorite or which one you think is the dumbest. And if you like the video, like and subscribe. And actually, you can also do that even if you didn't like the video. You won't get in trouble. Thanks for watching.